Now we're all good. Gonna start it.
Perfect, thanks. Hi, everyone that's joining us. We're just going to give it about a minute or so, let folks trickle back in from the break, and then we will get started with the panel today. Hope everyone had a thrilling 10 minutes back to your day before we kick off our admissions panel. So just give it another minute or so. Welcome, everybody. Just going to give it another few seconds while folks trickle in before we kick off. All right, I think we are going to get started, and as folks continue to trickle in, they will catch up. Welcome, everybody. If you attended our student panel a few moments ago, welcome back from the break. If you are currently joining us for the first time for the Hot Topics in Admissions panel, thank you so much for joining us today for our Beans virtual conference. My name is Stephanie Gallery. I'm one of the Senior Assistant Directors at Brandeis University, and I will be moderating this really exciting panel filled with unbelievably talented admissions leaders who will be spending the next 45 minutes or so answering some pre-scheduled questions and also answering questions that come in from the Q&A. A few logistical points. If you go below, we do have the option for a live transcript. If that's something you would like to turn on, you are more than welcome to. We also have the Q&A feature below. We are all Zoom experts at this point, so feel free to submit Q&A questions along the way. We will get through as many as we can with our panelists. We also have additional staff from all of our colleges that will be in there answering questions as well to hopefully get through everything. So before we get started, I wanted to spend a moment introducing our incredible panelists here today. We have Rebecca Simons, Director of Admissions at Brandeis University, Andrew Carter, Senior Associate Director of Admission at the College of the Holy Cross, Camille Booknight, Senior Associate Director and Operational Director of Admission at Emerson College, Kate Innes, Director of Undergraduate Admission at Simmons University, and Julie Lovelace, Associate Director of International Admissions at WPI. This is our wonderful team of panelists. If you'd like to take a quick picture of the screen, you have email addresses located here. I'll give everyone 10 seconds or so to do that, and then we will get started. And we did get a question right away in the Q&A. Yes, the entire conference is going to be recorded. I'll share more details at the end on how you can access the recording, updated closed captioning as well. So we are going to kick it off, everybody, with some hot topics in admissions. I'd love to kind of kick it off with just the impact that COVID-19 has had on your admissions process, whether that be application numbers, the differences between early action, early decision, regular decision, testing requirements, whatever you would like to cover. Everyone can touch briefly on this topic. Would anyone like to kick us off?
Start. Good afternoon, everybody. Camille Booknight from Emerson College. I think some of the things that we've noticed have been affected by COVID really aren't that impactful, which is a good thing. So our app numbers were fairly in line with previous years. We did go not test optional, we did have an ED round this year. We have been test optional for the previous 3 years. But the one thing that we found within our test optional process was that because we had an additional supplement, we found that a lot of students didn't complete that additional supplement because so many other schools went test optional and didn't require anything else. So that is something that we are looking into for our next cycle, to possibly remove that supplement, just make it optional for any student that wants to submit something to sort of showcase their passion for whatever major it is that they're applying to. I'll pass it on.
Go ahead, Julie. It's all looking to see who's unmuted themselves faster. Hi, everybody. Julie from WPI. I do work mostly with our international students, so the pandemic definitely had an effect on our international numbers. We saw a decrease in international applications and a decrease in enrolling international students. So that was personally disappointing, but I do think there's some positive trends. So just keeping our fingers crossed for the future. Two of the things that I think will change for next application cycle as a result of the pandemic is that for international students, we're going to be accepting self-reported TOEFL and IELTS scores, which is new for us. And then for all applicants, we've gone test blind. So we know that we've been test optional, but this year really highlighted a lot of the challenges that students were accessing that test. So I'm excited to share that with you all today.
I'll just say, at Holy Cross, we didn't change any of our requirements. We've been test optional for 14 years. So we were, I think, well equipped and prepared for a cycle with students not submitting testing. I would say one of the changes we saw was that interviews had always been an important part of our admissions process. And we have a high percentage of our applicants conduct interviews. And as the concept of those transitioning to the virtual space became more realistic, we all were sort of holding our breaths a little bit, because the only memory we had in our mind, the only concept we really understood was Skype interviews that we would do with international students from time to time in years past. And we really dreaded this move to virtual interviews. And the reality is that our fears were ungrounded. Virtual interviews were, by some measure, better than in-person interviews. The quality of the conversation was just as good, if not better, than in-person interviews. We found that students were more comfortable in their own space, enclosed that likely they had picked out rather than a parent had picked out. They weren't fidgeting on my couch, looking out my window, trying to focus. With all the distractions of Zoom, it was less distracting than being in the admissions office with all the stress and anxiety that comes with that. So we saw a strong number of students signing up for virtual interviews, and we really felt like we got to know the students in a more authentic way than we did with in-person interviews. We still will certainly go back to offering in-person interviews when that's appropriate, but we will never let go of a strong presence for virtual interviews.
Hi, everybody. At Brandeis, we had minimal impact to our admissions process because we have been test flexible for about 10 years. I will say traditionally about 10% of students elect to not submit the SAT or ACT, whereas this year about 50% of our students did not submit the SAT or ACT. So it definitely did change a little bit of how we evaluate applications using writing supplements or AP scores. But as a whole, I think the application process was fairly steady. We also saw a decline in our international applicants. It was not a surprise, but we did see an increase in our domestic students. And I think that just lends to the uncertainty of the year.
Hi all, I'm Kate from Simmons, and the big change for us was going test optional. So we had required test scores up until fall 2021, and it started as a temporary change for COVID and has now become a more permanent change. So we are enthused about that and the direction we're going in. Most students did not submit test scores. So a majority of students did not submit test scores, and we did rework our application review process to make sure it was equitable for how we were reviewing students with and without test scores. So that was a big change in our process this year. I would also say in terms of our reach, both in the country and internationally, we have a very small international population, and surprisingly, that percentage of international students went up, but there is a reason for that. We were working with a partner to help us recruit internationally, so very small numbers did increase, but we did also increase our out-of-state enrolling students by 25%, which was really interesting to us and not exactly what we expected. We did expect that the COVID timeframe would bring us more regional students, but we do think that all the virtual options we offered can have an impact on those out-of-state students that maybe we weren't reaching previously when we weren't doing as many virtual options. So yeah, so there are a number of changes for Simmons this year.
Wonderful. We'll jump into the next question. So were there any, I know everyone has kind of different policies that might have changed or not changed during COVID, but were there any events that you hosted during the pandemic virtually that you think your office will continue to host in future years, perhaps fly-in events that could be held virtually, campus tours, things of that nature that you want to share with all the folks watching today?
I'll get started. I constantly have been saying this year, like, I can't believe we never did this virtually before. Like, we only had one admitted student program, and if you didn't come to Brandeis, then you were out of luck. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned from this virtual environment. I know we'll continue to offer virtual information session, virtual campus tours, virtual interviews, because just the reach with our students is just so great. We also did do a virtual fly-in program, which I can see also continuing. So there are a lot of things that I think we'll continue to do. We just need to balance that with everything on campus that we are excited to do again.
I say the same exact thing, Rebecca. We scratch our head and say, like, why did we never do this? And I think it's one of the things we've been doing at the end of May and early June is reevaluating all of our virtual programming, deciding what will carry forward, what will sort of look to shape, what things work virtually, what things don't. I'll be the first to say college fairs don't work virtually, but so many other things do work really well virtually. And I think probably as we imagine in-person programming continue or returning, we'll look to mirror those efforts virtually. It's hard to imagine that we would offer an in-person program that didn't have some mirrored image of it in virtual space.
Fantastic, thank you. We did get a question, if everyone could briefly share what your campus visit policy is for this summer, and then any plans that you currently have for the fall. I know we're all still trying to figure that piece out, but at least for the summer for folks watching.
I can start. So for this summer, we started with small group tours, no more than 9 people per tour. So students are able to have 2 guests when they do register. We do have 3 student spots available for each tour time daily. June is going to be, since May's gone, June is going to be for all of our deposited students and any transfer admits that are still pending deposit. And then starting July, I think 6th, we're going to open it up to both prospective students and any other guests who want to visit. Fall, we have no idea what's happening yet. Still a work in progress. I think as our COVID core team sort of assesses what the state is doing and what sort of rules we can relax for having on-campus guests during the actual academic year when students are present, that will certainly sort of tell us which direction we're able to go in. It's about keeping our students safe. So we can't have people accessing buildings. We won't have people accessing those buildings.
For Simmons, we had opened back up for tours in March, and we reserved them specifically for our admitted students and then our deposited students. But as of June 1st, yesterday, we are open for juniors and transfers and all populations of students to visit. We're open for tours 3 days a week, 2 times a day. Our capacity is similar. We have right now 2 families per tour. So similar to yours, Camille. And we anticipate having two very small events this summer, and still trying to figure out what open houses might look like in the fall, maybe just small events for those. But we do plan to be open for tours pretty consistently from now on, and those have been going well for the most part. So we're excited to welcome students back to campus and show it off and bring them back to Boston.
At Brandeis, after a successful trial run with our admitted students, we will be opening our doors to visitors next Monday, June 7th. We will be offering in-person information session, tours, and interviews. Right now with the capacity about 40 for information sessions. And we expect to be open for business in the fall, pending any wild changes this summer.
Oh, Julie, yes.
I would say WPS comparable. There's a lot of changes these days with everything that's changing in the state, but yes, we're open. Come visit, send your students to come visit, and we'll make it happen.
Thanks, everyone. Question from our audience. Can you each share anything new happening on your campuses, whether that be majors, programs, initiatives, things that you are seeing coming down the pipeline?
There's a lot of new stuff happening at Emerson. So right now we're in talks we've started a new major, our interdisciplinary studies major. So we admitted our first full class into that this year. For hopefully next year, we'll be able to admit students into our global BCE program, which is in conjunction with ICMS in Sydney. We are also starting a new health humanities program, as well as a new media psychology program. I believe those will be put into action in 2023. So fall of 2023 is when students will be able to be admitted into that. I also know that we have started to run an accessibility sort of campaign across campus. So we do have an access organization that really is encouraging the community to come together and really focus on how accessible our campus is, whether it's for a physical disability or not, and what resources we have in place for those community members who need that additional access. So those are just a few of the things that we have going on.
I'll just touch upon some new building projects that have been going on at Holy Cross, much of which those of us in the admissions office haven't seen because we haven't been on campus for the last 14 months, but we just completed our second building project of an athletics complex at Holy Cross. We initially renovated and expanded our primary athletics complex. When we finished that, we tore down our secondary complex and built a brand new one there. That's just been completed. And we're about 6 months away from completing a brand new performing arts center, far and away the most expensive building we've ever built at Holy Cross. Our performing arts spaces at Holy Cross have always been described as totally fine. I would say we were rounding up when we described them as totally fine. There is nothing about a $100 million performing arts center that will be totally fine. We are excited about how that will just change culture, student life, in the face of arts at Holy Cross.
New at Brandeis, we have a brand new provost who is joining us from Texas A&M, which is very exciting. She actually got her PhD from Brandeis, so it's kind of new, but a familiar return. Something also exciting that just got approved by the Board of Trustees is the approval for the proposal of a new interdisciplinary major in engineering. So while this is not something that we will be able to get off the ground in the next couple of years, it is something that people are looking to bring to Brandeis and could fairly drastically change a lot of the way that we do things, but we're excited.
Yeah, new stuff at WPI. I would say our newest major is data science, and that's kind of a reaction from industry where we always had data science as a master's degree, but our partners that came to campus for recruiting asked for more students. So we've added it as an undergrad degree. So for those students that like computer science, they like business, they like a little psychology sprinkled in, that's a great major that I think is popping up on a lot of STEM focused campuses and maybe more. And then we have a new building opening in January 2022. So it's been great to see the construction coming along. It's just going to house a lot of student services. So accessibility services, the registrar, academic advising, all will have one home. There will be a Starbucks there. There's a lot of great conference and meeting space. Our campus itself has been growing. Our student population has been growing. So this building is going to help support some of that growth, and we're excited to see it. And that's in addition to the test blind news, which is our new biggest announcement.
And my last Zoom was not my friend for just a minute there, but I'm back. And I know we're talking about changes and updates on campus. So in terms of our physical space, we have a lot going on in terms of construction. We accelerated some of our upgrades while our students have been remote this past year. And so we're able to really renovate a lot of the student spaces, student organization spaces. So they're coming back to some really neat new upgraded areas. But that's kind of on the smaller scale. What's on the bigger scale is that we're completely redoing our science facilities, our nursing labs, all of our labs, and moving them into an existing 3-story building, which is currently our library. So everything is kind of shifting around. And that's due to be completed summer 22. So next summer. So our incoming students will definitely benefit from those brand new science facilities as soon as next year. And then a long-term plan for Simmons is that we want to become something we're calling One Simmons. So if you're familiar with our campus layout, you know that we take up actually 2 city blocks in Boston, and we're separated by Emmanuel College is kind of in between our academic quad and our residence quad. And so our long-term 5-ish year goal is to bring the residence space onto the academic quad in a large high-rise building, which will include dining facilities, health facilities, sports center facilities, sort of on the space that's existing right now for the science building. So once we get that science space moved over, that will be the big shift. So big things coming in terms of physical space. In terms of new programs, we did start a new program this year, which is a dual degree with Columbia in engineering. So it's actually a 3+2 program, a dual bachelor's. We have a number of accelerated programs already, but this really opens up that option to students, many of them international. We have a lot of interest in engineering, domestic as well. So that's been a good start. We have our first enrolling class fall 21 with the engineering.
Thanks for sharing, everyone. A very exciting time to be working on all of our campuses. I would love to hear from some of you, maybe what type of anti-bias or DEI work are your offices doing with your staff as we enter into a new cycle, a new application season, or what type of anti-bias or DEI work are you seeing across your campuses that's being instilled for staff, for students, and faculty as well?
I'm happy to go first. Yeah, so I think it's been a really important year in terms of talking about race and equity in college admissions in particular. After George Floyd was murdered, our campus had a lot of different conversations. And one thing that happened sort of organically was within the admissions office itself, we formed like a race and equity working group, which is not just our diversity team talking about these issues, but really kind of a multi-pronged effort. And so we've been tackling some big and some small things. Some of the things that we've accomplished this year with that working group are, we got all our tour guides and student workers trained in bias training. We were more proactive about awarding scholarship dollars to transfer students because we know a lot of underrepresented students come to us through transfer pipeline. We started a conditional math acceptance program where students who hadn't met our minimum math level of pre-calculus were able to complete that requirement with WPI over the summer before they transitioned into WPI. So it's been nice to see like a community of admissions counselors saying, okay, these are some of the race and equity issues that affect our work specifically. So how can we move these initiatives forward?
I'm happy to speak to Brandeis. So Brandeis University tasked all departments with really focusing on anti-racism plans and holding all offices accountable. So the admissions office, along with all offices on campus, came together and worked on a plan for goals that could be accomplished within the next year. And they include everything from increasing the recruitment travel to schools that have underrepresented populations, to working on a better path for our student workers to be involved in the office, to increasing our search name buys for diverse student populations. So it's something that I think that we're all on board with, and it's work that absolutely needs to be done. I'm also excited because we just piloted our first year of reading in terms of indicators of success and trying to take the bias out of the way that we read. And that was a very successful year. So there's still a lot of more work to be done, but I'm excited in the direction that Brandeis is going and how seriously they're taking it.
I can hop in next. So at Emerson, I actually coordinate both our international and multicultural recruitment efforts. So that's one of my responsibilities. And through that, I do try to make sure that we do some diversity training as an office. So I don't care what everybody else is doing, but my team needs to make sure that they're sort of getting with the programming and understanding how to be better allies, especially in the space that we're in today. So whether that's readings or film viewings, sending out articles, really calling to the carpet. And I think our president did this well after the murder of George Floyd, when all the protests were happening. He basically sent a letter to the entire community asking what we're going to do to help create change within our community in relation to race and equity. So I do think that a lot of departments have sort of heeded that call and are trying to find ways to sort of further their knowledge base, ensure that they're hiring more diverse faculty. So the best way to get a diverse population of students is if that person sees somebody that looks like them in that classroom or in that space. So those are some of the things that we're doing at Emerson. Of course, still continuing with our diversity outreach intern program, where we hire multicultural and international students to assist with the outreach that's going on for our multicultural recruitment and international recruitment populations. We do the same thing with the parents of those groups. So whether that's chats, special events, it's all about being able to connect and bring these people into the community.
The only thing I'll add to everything you've already heard, much the same at Holy Cross, and I think one of the things that we've realized is that this will become a new ongoing normal in our office, the way we continue to educate ourselves and continue to improve the ways in which we work with students and work with each other. And I expect and hope that this will be one of these things that, down the road we'll say, like, can you ever imagine we didn't do this? Sort of like virtual programming. And this sort of new normal in the way in which we continue to reflect and look to improve both as a staff and as a community. I think it's a real credit to and a real benefit to our profession, both in admissions and in the world of education as well.
I would just add, Simmons has for a while had a robust anti-bias, anti-racist training for the different departments of the university, but we've always had an internal anti-bias around application review and around other things we do. But in the last year, our diversity team within the admission office has added something that has been really worthwhile, which is to look at diverse topics and what is diversity, and taking different topics each week to kind of dissect them, have an expert speak about them. So topics such as race, but also looking at all the different ways that diversity affects our students and how we want to be inclusive to different student groups and different student populations. So we took a special look at veterans and military. We took a look at adult and transfer students, which we've been working with for quite a while, but kind of making sure that that we're thinking about them in an inclusive way in our programming, looking at trans and non-binary, looking at undocumented students. So kind of taking each one of those topics by itself and really kind of thinking about how we can improve our interactions with those student groups. And then we also had book groups, and we've just recently kind of updated and revived those, which is just sort of one of our homegrown admission office things where we're kind of looking at different topics, listening to podcasts, and kind of just having less formal conversation, which I think has been really worthwhile as well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing. We spend a lot of time talking about admitting students, yielding students when they matriculate. I'd love to spend a moment talking about what we do to support students when they get to our campus. So maybe what resources your college has for first generation students, for students with learning differences, with mental health needs. So any resources specifically that your school has to support students in their first year and of course throughout their 4 years as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that COVID laid bare was the need for mental health resources on campus. I mean, of course, we always had a counseling center, but we were seeing students grappling with real issues. The rules this year to be on campus were restrictive, and I think that they had a lot of impacts on student mental health. So definitely there's been growth in that area at WPI. I think we'll all probably say a lot of the same things, but being a STEM school, I'll highlight, students with dyslexia and dysgraphia and ADHD are no stranger to us. We have a really great Office of Accessibility Services that tries to be proactive in their outreach instead of reactive. And then different support when students are on campus. They'll typically have 3 advisors in their first year: a resident advisor, a faculty or staff advisor, and then a community advisor that's just there for all that stuff that doesn't fit into one of those first 2 buckets. So definitely lots of support. That's the beauty of being a school on the smaller side.
I can hop in next. So at Emerson, the best resource that I can tell a student to sort of seek access to is our Office of Student Success. And through that office, they're providing resources for first generation students, low income students, anybody who just needs somebody to talk to figure out where their next step should be. They also do provide a first year sort of experience 1 credit course that all first year students are automatically enrolled into. And that's called our immersion program. It does happen during either the summer or the fall, so students can choose which one they want to enroll into. And that's a course that's going to be taught by different members across the community, where they're basically just having conversations, learning how to navigate the different spaces on campus, learning how to navigate the different resources that are available. Of course, like Julie mentioned, student accessibility services as well as psychological services are something that our students do actively utilize. It is something that we've added more resources to throughout this year just because of the need that a lot of our students had, whether that was virtually or in person. So those are just a few things that I'll touch on.
Now, I'll mention one thing I've learned a little bit more about recently at Holy Cross. In addition to a lot of the great programs you've heard from other schools, Holy Cross has similar offerings. And I've heard from our students more recently that one of the best options available for them at Holy Cross has been our first year seminar program we have. Every first year student is enrolled in a small seminar, usually a maximum of 12 or 13 students, and there's about 50 different topics that the students choose from. But the relationships that they're forming with the professors in these classes, it's a full year class. It's designed to sort of ease that transition to their first year in college. And they're academically based, but so many of the students I hear from and who have spoken on our webinars talk about the relationships they formed with these professors, how they go meet with these professors from these seminars, and they spend most of the time talking about things that aren't related to that class. They're talking about their lives as a first year student, their transition to college, difficulties and successes. And so many of the older students at Holy Cross, when they reflect upon, when I've asked them in webinars, who's your favorite professor? So many of them point to that freshman seminar professor who I think becomes more than just a teacher in a class. They become an advisor, a professor, a mentor, a friend, a cheerleader. And I think that the original goal for this program that we established about 13 years ago, while we did not have a pandemic in mind for it, it certainly has sort of helped prepare our student body and our community as a whole to weather this past year.
The one thing I would add, I mean, we have very similar supports, echoing my colleagues here, but I think one thing that Brandeis does extremely well is our orientation and kind of setting the landscape for what the year is going to look like. And it's all student run. So I think our incoming students feel very comfortable asking questions, getting lost on campus. I think that sets the stage for a productive year.
I would add very similar supports for students. We have a more recent program in the last couple of years called First to Finish, which is specifically for first generation students, which has been very successful. But I would also echo what Drew said about that first year course. We have something called a Boston course, which gets our students out into the city of Boston and oriented to Boston as well as to our campus. And I think that's been really important for our students. Obviously, it didn't quite happen in the same way this past year, but every other year it has gotten students out into Boston around a certain topic, whether that be food in Boston, sustainability, all kinds of different things. And so that's something that I think our students really kind of look back to and remember about their Simmons incoming experience.
Thank you, everyone. I'd love to pose more of an open-ended question that maybe a couple of you can touch upon, which are, what are some hot topics you see in the higher education world right now, whether it be articles you read recently that made you pause for a moment, things you're hearing from colleagues or other universities, just some hot topics that you would like to bring up and discuss.
I'll say I read this snippet in one of those emails we all get, and it was an excerpt from a book called Little Platoons. And the excerpt, in the excerpt, the writer really went after us in the world of college admissions, and I so liked the way in which he attacked the work that we do and the sort of infrastructure of college admissions. And I went out and immediately bought the book. His hate for us was so strong. I couldn't wait to read what he had to say. And he really goes, it's about sort of American culture, and he goes after competitive admissions for preschool. He goes after competitive youth sports, and then he goes after college admissions. And while he did not, and he sort of talked purposely about, he wasn't there to propose a lot of solutions. It really was, it really got me thinking as a parent. It got me thinking as an educator, as an admissions professional, about the messages we send, about the work that we do, about the way in which we talk with families, the way in which we talk about admissions in general. And it certainly has got my brain spinning on a lot of topics. Little Platoons, it's called.
I think a topic we're all talking about, and especially I'm sure school counselors, is the impact this COVID year has had on students' education, both short-term and long-term, and how we continue to, as admission people, look at that year as students apply for the next 4 years, but also what does that mean for gaps in education that may have happened, and in different schools and different school systems, what did that mean? So it's very varied. And how do we account for that, both in the admission process, but also at your high schools, how do you account for that? And then when they get to college, how do we account for any gaps and make sure that we still continue to have the resources students will need to deal with those more long-term effects?
Just a couple things off the top of my head that I'm thinking a lot about and reading a lot about. It's just the mental health of students as they return to campus, the validity of standardized testing moving forward, and if that is something that we can actually get rid of, and just the future of recruitment travel. I imagine that's on a lot of people's minds, is what does that look like in the new normal? And I don't have the answers for any of these yet.
I think one thing that's sort of been top of conversation for our office is the changes with Common App, and how those are going to impact the way that we review applications. In particular, things like the criminal history question, the disciplinary questions. What does that look like? So that's something that we've been having a lot of conversations surrounding. Specifically related to Title IX issues and what that looks like on our campus.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a lot about how to do this both virtually and in person, right? For so many years, we only did in person and we were all tired then, and now we've done only virtual for a year and we're all tired now. So how are we going to do both of those moving forward? And I think that's where we'd really love to hear from all of our school and independent and college counseling friends about, what is really most effective for your students, and how can we meet them halfway?
Thank you, everyone. We have 2 minutes left, so we're going to rapid fire through one last question. How have you factored in the admissions evaluation impact of COVID restrictions on the college applicants' ability to engage in clubs and leadership? So, right, many things are canceled right now. Students aren't able to engage in their clubs and leadership opportunities. How do you think that will impact the admissions process, if at all, for your offices? What are your plans?
I don't think it'll impact the way that we read decisions or the way that we review applications. Apologies. I think that we all get that you don't have access to things in similar ways that the rest of us don't have access to some of the things that we would love to be doing. So we would never hold that against a student. I think it's going to be very important for them to showcase themselves through other aspects of their application that really speak to their character and who they are as a person and how they will be able to contribute to our community based on those things.
I thought we saw really cool stuff this year. Like, we saw students, really rallying to support their communities. They were 3D printing PPE. They were developing websites and apps to help connect people to vaccination centers. There's other ways that we saw those qualities that we're looking for, even given this year.
I couldn't agree more, Julie. One of my favorite things about doing interviews over the last year was hearing kids' stories about the things they have been doing. And I think so often they think those things aren't worthy of being represented in their application because they weren't secretary of a club or captain of a team. But I heard so many incredible stories about kids picking up sewing or kids babysitting for neighbors or spending time with their grandparents or helping their family with chores around the house. And man, I wish there was a field for some of the stuff on the Common App, because they were incredible stories that we heard about in interviews and occasionally in essays, but I know more of that is out there than students were actually reporting.
And I do just have to add, I think there does need to be something said for, students that have some downtime, especially during an extremely stressful period in their lives. And that's okay too.
Wonderful. Well, we are going to end it there. So for all of the folks watching today, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists here today for the admissions panel, our student panelists as well. Quick shout out again to the Beans Planning Committee, Mallory, Allie, Liz, Nicole, Julia, and Julie. We worked really hard over the past 6 months to get something wrapped up for everybody, learn more about our colleges, but of course we are hopeful to be able to offer an in-person Beans soon. Couple of details and what's coming next for the rest of the day. If you're curious to learn more about Beans, you can do so on our website. It is wpi.edu/beans, B-E-A-N-S. The entire Beans conference from today, both panels will soon be found on our website archives. This includes an updated closed captioning, so we'll be getting that done as well. Details about our partnership, a lot of fun details you can find on our website. Again, we're hopeful to resume our regular Beans programming soon. We're really eager to host you on our campuses. If you are in the greater Boston area, please come visit us, send us a note. We'd love to have you for our campus tours and meet with you, so please do reach out. If you're interested in being considered for future tours, we definitely recommend you contact Beans at our Gmail, which one of my colleagues will put in the chat for everybody. You can also stop by the info booth today for more information. A little bit about remaining offerings for the day. So each college and university is going to be offering drop-in rooms with admissions staff. So all the schools here, you can come touch base with staff from our universities, get to know us, get to know some other faces, but also ask specific questions for each of our colleges. Those will be happening until about 4:30 today. We also have the Beans info booth, which is general information about the Beans tour, who we are, what we do, which will also remain open until 4:30. But for now, really wishing everybody a relaxing and safe summer. Best of luck as we enter next year's cycle for your seniors. Of course, if you're working with juniors and beyond as they begin their college search. But thank you everyone so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.